Hi everyone, so today we're going to be doing some fall DIY decorations. These are primarily made out of Dollar Tree products, all the florals and like pumpkins and all the things that you're going to see. I'm pretty sure just about everything came from the Dollar Tree. Of course, my supplies like hot glue and hot glue guns and stuff did not come from Dollar Tree. But we're going to get started with a lovely harvest wreath. So I have some leaf garlands from the Dollar Tree. They honestly have the better quality leaves for about the same price as you would get them on a bushel. But they look very good. So what I'm doing, I'm putting the leaves on the front side of the form, but I have it upside down so that I can glue them from behind. That way that you don't see glue spots. And that's just for the first layer of leaves because they will be kind of in the background. So if you have glue spots on them, you don't want them to accidentally peek through. You can always do it from the front as well, but you may see glue peeking through. So just this first layer, I'm trying to make sure to spread them out because I don't have that many of the orange leaves from the garland that I was using, but it's okay because I can fill in the holes with some of the other leaves that I have in just a little bit. But you want to get a good base covering because everything else that you glue onto this wreath is actually going to glue onto these leaves. And of course it'll be all glued together on its own anyway, so it'll all be interlocked together. So don't think that just because you glue on top of these leaves it's going to come off very easily. But here I am cutting apart another strand of leaves. This one's more yellow, but I'm keeping the stems on these leaves instead of clipping them off at the base. That way that they kind of have a little bit more dimension. They stand up off the wreath because whenever you're doing a wreath, you kind of want to make sure that the leaves or your background foliage, whatever it happens to be, kind of stand up off the background. It makes it look a little bit more full. And you're also going to want to make sure that you're covering any holes that you see in your stuff. I'm cutting apart another garland that has some oak-looking leaves on it, and you're going to see me mixing those in as well. Whenever you're creating something like a wreath or anything like that, you want to make sure that you're balancing out your colors as well as the types of things that you're using. So if you use something on the left side, you want to make sure to try to use it on the right side as well. Or if you don't have something that's the same shape, maybe something that's the same color. So if I put a red leaf on the left side, I may put like a red flower on the other side, just to kind of give it that balance. Now that being said, when you get to your final touches, you can intentionally make something look off-center or asymmetrical just to kind of give it a good fun whimsical look, because sometimes whenever you're making something, if it's a little bit too symmetrical, it'll make it look a little bit off. You won't be able to put your finger quite on it, but you won't like the way it looks. The only exception that I've found is if your room that you're putting your object in, if it is designed to be symmetrical, like you have a couch on one side of the room and on the other side of the room your fireplace looks like it could be split down the middle and be the same on both sides, then you want it to be as symmetrical as possible because then it matches the rest of the room. Okay, so you saw me put on some sparkly little fronds. I like to throw in just a little bit of sparkle here and there, that way that it kind of gives it a little bit of life. Some people like it, some people don't. If you're not a glitter fan, you don't ever have to put them in there. It's just my personal preference. And the little twigs that you just saw me put in, they stand out from the wreath. Again, this is to help with giving it that full look because it makes the wreath appear wider than what it actually is. This is really helpful when you're using more cost-effective measures to make your decorations. You always want to use any optical illusions you possibly can to make it look a little bit more full or a little bit more expensive than what it actually is. Now I'm using some cotton, it looks like cotton buds. They are from the Dollar Tree. They are not quite as good quality as what you might get from like Hobby Lobby or anything like that. If you want more realistic looking ones, then you could always swing by there and pick them up. They're a little bit more expensive. They're definitely not going to be $1, but they should serve the same purpose. Me personally, I think these look just fine. That's one of those products that I'm willing to give on, because if you're close enough to tell the difference in them, then you're just a little bit too close. So what I'm doing, I'm weaving these down through the leaves, and I'm making sure to wrap the stems around the wires in the back of the form. That way that they're basically held in place on their own, and then I'm just tacking them down behind some of the cotton buds and stems with glue just to make sure that they don't shift around on me, because if you leave them loose, they may come loose and slide around whenever you put your wreath into storage. And you can just see me finagling that right there. And I'm actually adding wheat to mine, since this is going to be a harvest wreath anyway. Whenever it comes to harvest time, one of the quintessential things that you see around is a lot of wheat, and this is something that I want to be able to keep up all season if I want. So you can get these bundles of wheat at the Dollar Tree as well. They have them in this very bright, fresh grain look that I have here, but they also have them where they look a little bit more aged, like they've been left out in the sun for a while. They're both beautiful, but for this one, since I'm using such bright foliage, I wanted to make sure that the wheat was bright as well. And what I'm doing, I'm kind of putting the wheat going in two different directions at the center on the bottom. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to put a nice big bundle of flowers to pull focus to the bottom of the wreath, because I'm going to be doing like a nest. In just a second, you'll see what I mean. I'm going to be putting pumpkins in, and I kind of want them to be sitting on like a solid foundation. But there's going to be several focal points in this wreath, and I'll go through them in just a second. But now I'm starting to add my flowers. So I'm starting with the darkest color first. I've found that segmenting your colors whenever you're putting them on the wreath kind of helps you figure out where you want to place everything. Mine, I'm making it symmetrical in the placement of the flowers until I get to the very final touches, and then I start changing it around and making it asymmetrical. So I started with my orange mums there that you saw, and I'm starting to add these white berries. They're not necessarily what I would put next. I honestly forgot about them until I started putting those orange mums on there and I saw them. Them I'm just straight up hot gluing in place, and they are gonna give a little pop of white to the massive amounts of color that are on this wreath. Now notice that I'm making sure to balance what I'm doing, so I put those two red mums, one on each side, and then I put the bright orange flowers on the bottom on each side of that mum, and I'm adding in sunflowers now. I've moved on to my yellows, and now I have little white mini sunflowers that are going in. I'm only using a couple of them here and there to help balance out the wreath. You want to make sure that, again, it is as balanced as you can get it. I've got a burlap looking daisy up at the top, and this goes into that rule of thirds thing that a lot of designers use. They want to make sure that you have 3 focal points in your piece, as well as you want to kind of make sure that they're spread out, because your eye naturally rests on the division of a room or a composition in 3 different areas. So I have my pumpkins at the bottom, then I have harvest in the middle, and then I have a bow and the burlap flower at the top. And if you look at it from side to side, I have cotton on one side, harvest, pumpkins, and all that stuff in the middle, and then the cotton on the other side. And that's the finished product. And that's the basics of putting together a wreath. Now we're going to do a more modern take on a wreath, and it's also going to be a little bit more on the spooky side of fall. So what I'm using is another wreath form from the Dollar Tree, as well as this is a cheap little old pillowcase from the Dollar Tree. I got it in black since this is going to be a spooky wreath. And now I'm just hot gluing the corners down and making sure that it is tacked down really, really well. Me personally, I would take and stitch it, but for the purposes of this, I figured anybody can use a hot glue gun, but it takes a little bit longer to figure out how to sew, so I figured a hot glue gun would be a little bit more accessible. So you're going to take and try to make sure that this is going to be as smooth as possible on the front. So all these little corners that you see up, I'm going to slowly be making sure that they are glued down as well as I possibly can. And it is not particularly hard, just make sure you're very careful and don't burn your fingers. Hot glue is of course very hot. And I've gotten myself burned a few times, but that's what happens when you lose focus on what you're doing. So here you're seeing me fold over all of these little corners and try to get them as smooth as possible on the front. You can constantly check the front and make sure that you're getting it smooth. One thing that I did not do that I probably should have was put my iron on a very low heat and give this little faux satin pillowcase a good press, because in a little bit you'll see that there's a wrinkle in the fabric, and that was unfortunately unavoidable. You learn from your mistakes, so next time I will make sure to iron my pillowcase before I do this. However, I should be getting close to putting all of these corners in. I just have a couple of small ones, so let's see here. Just doing a little bit of finessing and making sure that everything is as it should be. We want it as smooth on the front as we possibly can get it. By the time you're done, this should kind of look like a button that you would wear on your lapel. And yeah, it should just look like that. So it should look like a little rounded button. And now you're gonna take and start putting your things on here. Now I got a bunch of random foliage. The spookier stuff was not put out at Dollar Tree whenever I went to get supplies for this, so most of this is fall foliage, and I kind of had to create my own spooky foliage for this. And there was a couple of small things like spiders and bats and things, so you'll see a few of those things pop up. But for now, I'm using these purple berries. They're similar to the white ones that I used in the other wreath. I'm going for a very purple and black theme for this one. And so this one's going to be an asymmetrical wreath. So you're not even going to be putting things all the way around the wreath. What you're going to do is you're going to create a small arrangement on the side of your wreath. You can also do this at the bottom if you like. It all is dependent on personal taste. Me personally, I like the side look, so I'm kind of making a crescent moon shape with these berries. And then we're going to take and make sure that they're tacked down very well with a hot glue gun. Now, I will give you a heads up that hot glue guns have different temperatures. A low temperature hot glue gun may work okay with putting things on fabric. But with that, you also have to remember that you are hot gluing plastic stems, and it may not hold in a low temperature hot glue gun. But be very, very aware that when you have a high temperature hot glue gun, it will give you severe burns if you burn yourself, and it also can melt plastic. Mine is a high temperature and it's holding very, very well. It makes a good bond. However, I will note that some of the stems on the flowers and stuff started melting, which worked out fine because now it's also plastic melted into the fabric, so it's not going to be coming off anytime soon. Alright, so you saw me add the dark purple flowers, and the reason that the video paused right there was so that you could see that you don't really have to add all the spooky flair to it to have a very simple, elegant, quote-unquote spooky wreath. You don't have to add the extra stuff that I'm getting ready to add. As you can see, those bright purple flowers there, it looks like they have ping pong balls in them. That's because they are ping pong balls. Unfortunately, you don't really get to see on film what I was trying to show you. I took the ping pong balls and glued them into the flowers and drew eyeballs on them because, of course, they didn't have the spooky eyeballs out at Dollar Tree yet. So I tried to do it with Dollar Tree markers. They are not quite as pigmented as I had hoped. Otherwise, they would have shown up better on film. I would probably go for a Sharpie or a little bit more of a high-quality marker, which you can always reuse, so that's always great. They did have, however, these sparkly chenille stems. They had them in purple and black and I think silver maybe, but all I'm doing is wrapping it around my finger and then hot gluing those randomly into the arrangement to give it a little bit more depth. And again, that little pop of sparkle that I like so much. And we're just going to take and make them pop out everywhere, that way that they just give it a little bit of a spring to it. The only thing I will say, adding these to your arrangement, make sure that whenever you pull it out, if you decide to store it and use it again the next year, your chenille stems, make sure that you straighten them back out and then recurl them. Otherwise, they're going to be all crunched and sad looking. Alright, so I have pulled out a sparkly spider here, and what I'm going to do with this asymmetrical wreath, I'm going to put him off to the side over here and glue him down like he's crawling around the side of the wreath. I also found these little LED lights that are shaped like bats, and they're purple, and so I'm weaving those into the flowers, and you'll see them come on there. They look very nice. Now these are battery operated, so make sure that you have batteries with you, and I am going to take and put the wires around the back of it and hot glue the battery pack in place onto the back of the wreath so that I can make sure to access it if I need to, and to be able to turn the wreath on and off. That way we're not wasting batteries. The wires, you should be able to just hot glue the wires themselves to the back of it so they're not hanging out, and then you can just glue the casing down for the batteries. Alright, so I'm adding a couple of more spiders to the actual flowers, just to give it a little bit of balance. And I'm adding this metal word spooky. It also came from the Dollar Tree. They have several different sets. They have a harvest set, and then they have a more spooky set that goes with that. And they hot glue down very easily, and I'm using wire to poke through the fabric and turn it into a loop at the top. That is the finished product. Whenever you're making any flower arrangements or wreaths, and you can kind of see my eyeballs there, but if you are making a wreath or any type of arrangement, try your best to use uneven numbers. You want to try your best to use odds. For some reason, the human brain tends to find more beauty in that type of asymmetry. Again, unless your room that you're putting your arrangement in is perfectly symmetrical, in which case you want to go for even numbers. It's kind of up to the person that's doing it. But usually 3, 5, 7, you want to go for a number that's odd. That way it kind of balances itself out, because you never know. If you use 4, you might have a hole in the middle, and then you need to fill it with that extra 1, and then there you go. There's your odd number. So it's always nice to have that extra. Next, we're going to do a centerpiece for a dining room table. So in this, we actually have, it's made out of a charger, a plastic wine glass turned upside down, a plastic plate, another plastic wine glass turned upside down, and then a plastic upside down bowl. I did take and spray paint I did not spray paint these. I used acrylic paint from the Dollar Tree. It is not regulated for plastic, so it did not set properly. In the future, I would probably use spray paint. It's not that much more expensive to get a thing of spray paint. Make sure that if you are underage and doing this, make sure you have adult supervision at all times, and make sure you use it in a well-ventilated place. I made sure to E6000, which is a type of really, really strong craft glue, to hold this together. I did try to hot glue it, but even with the high temperature hot glue gun, it did not hold. So I recommend E6000. However, I do have to give you a warning that it is considered a carcinogen, and it does have very strong fumes. So if you do choose to use it, please do wear a mask, and make sure that you are outside or in a very well ventilated area if you do choose to use it. And so you see me here, I'm gluing on some lace trim onto this. This is to give it a little bit more of a farmhouse feel. When it comes down to the harvest time, I kind of feel like it has a little bit of a farmhouse feel to it anyway. This trim is actually from the Dollar Tree as well. It's usually in the floral section, or wherever they keep their ribbon at your local Dollar Tree. But it's very good quality for $1. You don't get a ton on a roll, but honestly, like, you could get 2 or 3 rolls and be set for whatever project you're doing. You could even use it for sewing if you wanted. But it makes for a fantastic trim for this. Even though you're not going to see it very, very much, it does help to have a little bit of something underneath your foliage. That way that whenever people are looking at it, because you know somebody's going to be up close looking at it, it just gives a little bit of a point of interest for people, because it's not just a plain black stand underneath it. Now again, I'm cutting apart one of those strands of leaves, and I'm gluing those down flat to the plate. We're going to start flat at first and try to cover as much of the plates and the bowls. Make sure you leave holes, because you do want to add things on top of that. And if you start adding leaves, everything's going to be connected. Most of the time that's not a problem, but as you're starting to add things, it's going to be a real problem. I'm adding some of those sparkly fronds that I liked from before. And I'm not going to make you watch me put all of these leaves on because trust me, there's a lot of them. So I'm going to jump forward in just a second to when the leaves are done and I've added a few more of the fronds. Try to balance them on all sides. When you're making something that's completely round that's going to be seen on all sides, try to keep that in considerations. What I do, I divide the object into thirds instead of halves. And so you can see that the bottom tier has 3 fronds on it and the top one has 2. That way that no matter which way you turn the arrangement, you can see something of interest, and that'll become more apparent as I go on. You'll see that everything's done most of the time in odd numbers, and it's done in a way that no matter what direction you're looking at it, you're seeing something different. And so now you're seeing me put on leaves with the stems like I did with the wreath, and that is just to give it a little bit of height. And what you're going to do eventually is start gluing them to the wine glass that's in the middle. That's the reason I chose the wine glass, so it had some surface area at the bottom for you to start gluing leaves to, and that's going to give your arrangement a little bit of height on those plates. Otherwise it'll just look very, very flat. The same with the bowl on the top. That's the reason I chose it instead of using a flat saucer. You could also do that if you just wanted to make like a cupcake stand. But it gives it that dome shape. Alright, so now you see that I've already done all of the leaves, and I've added a few more fronds. There's some at the top on the bowl that are hanging down, and that's just to give it a little bit more interest. I'm adding some of those white little beads that you saw that were on the harvest wreath. I'm going for the same theme, that way that they match pretty well. And I just put them sporadically because I didn't have but a handful of those, so I was trying to make sure they were spread out very, very well. And now I'm adding in stalks of wheat. This is the one that looks like it's been left out in the outside for a while. It's a little bit more of a darker brown. And I'm just curling the end of it after I pull it off of the bush, and then gluing onto that loop and then sticking it underneath all of the leaves to like make sure it's anchored to the plate, because those will slide around. And you're seeing me add in some mini sunflowers. They are an orange color. I'm trying to put them in sporadically because when you start pulling the heads off of the bush, they come off in twos, and they are very small, and you don't want them all clustered together. You kind of want them spread out in there. And then you're seeing me plop in mums. I'm trying to make sure to get them balanced all the way around. Again, dividing that arrangement up into thirds helps. And the bowl, what I did, I tried to put the most on the bottom, a little bit less in the middle, and then the least on the top. So there's only one flower of each kind on the top unless I needed an extra one for filler, which you may see later on. I'm adding sunflowers and stuff in here, trying to make sure that every surface is covered. Whenever you're looking at an arrangement, if you see a spot where there's no flowers, or you're seeing bare glass, or not glass, plastic or black peeking through, make sure you plop in some extra flowers or leaves to fill in that hole. And then you're going to take and make sure that you are keeping this thing as balanced as possible as you're going. As you notice, I keep spinning it around to add in all the extra flowers that I'm adding. Whenever you're picking out your florals for your arrangement, make sure that you get different sizes of flowers, because you can always add in bigger, more expensive flowers if you wanted to, like from Hobby Lobby or whatever, if you can get them on sale or whatever you want to do. But always make sure you get multiple sizes, so you can see that I have like the mini sunflowers, the little itty bitty yellow flowers that you see there, and then I have the smaller mums, then I have bigger mums, I have sunflowers, I have daisies, I have all kinds of different things going in there. And I'm adding in those burlap daisies that you saw from the wreath, that way that it has a little bit more of, like I said, that farmhouse feel. There's some yellow bell stems that I'm putting in there just to make them stand up. There's going to be 3 on the top that you'll see in the final pictures. I'm adding in some, I call them swizzle sticks. They're just little sprigs that stick up. These are purple. And yes, purple is the fall color, even though it's used all year round, but it's considered a fall color. but I'm just sticking those in so that they stand up off the thing, and you're seeing me add in all of these random pumpkins. They have all of these at the Dollar Tree. Some of them are metallic looking. There's one that's got burlap on it. There's white ones. There's orange ones. At the very, very tip top, on the very top of that bowl, I did put a white pumpkin there, and I put the word thankful at the very top. And there's those yellow bell stems that I was talking about. And that's what the finished arrangement looks like. It's quite large. It's made for the middle of a dining room table. And these are all of my finished products. I'm very proud of every single one of them. They turned out much better than I expected, and I really appreciate them. So as always, I really appreciate you coming here, and thanks for watching. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and share our YouTube page, and we also have our Facebook as well. So please do subscribe and come to our library page to see all the wonderful library content that we have to offer. All right, bye.